My name is Harper Lewis. I am 27 years old, and the night I found out the man I thought I would marry was living a double life, something inside me broke, and something far colder took its place. It started like any ordinary evening. The air outside was sticky with the late summer heat, and I was sitting on the couch in our apartment, scrolling through Pinterest boards of wedding dresses. I had a mug of chamomile tea cooling on the coffee table and a notepad full of scribbles. Caterers, venues, color palettes. Our wedding was supposed to be 6 months away. I should have been giddy, but instead I felt restless. Uneasy. Ethan, my fiancé, had texted earlier that he'd be working late again. Lately, those words had become a soundtrack to my evenings. I wanted to believe him, to believe he was grinding away for us, but a dull ache in my chest told me something didn't fit. I stared at the phone in my hand, thumb hovering over his name. Call. Whoa. I didn't want to be that fiancé, the one who nagged and begged for attention. But still, I needed something to quiet the gnawing suspicion. That's when it happened. My phone buzzed. But it wasn't Ethan. It was a message request on Instagram, from a stranger. Woman. The preview line made my stomach flip. You don't know me, but you need to know about Ethan. My hand shook as I opened it. The message stretched long, each word dragging me deeper into a nightmare I hadn't prepared for. I don't know how else to tell you this, but I've been seeing Ethan for over a year. He told me he wasn't serious with you. I didn't even know you two were engaged. I thought you deserved to know. Attached to the message were screenshots, photos. Him with her, at restaurants in her apartment. His arm draped casually across her shoulders like it was the most natural thing in the world. There was even one of him in a hoodie I had bought him last Christmas. My Christmas gift, wrapped around his betrayal. I gasped so loudly the mug toppled off the coffee table, splashing lukewarm tea across the rug. My body felt numb, but my mind raced a million miles an hour. Whoa. Couldn't be real. People fake things all the time online. This could be some sick joke. But then came the worst part. The final nail. A selfie of Ethan kissing her cheek, her laughing, her nails on his chest. The timestamp. From the same night he had told me he was working late. The room spun. My vision tunneled until all I could see were those images, burning into me like brands I could never scrub away. I clutched my phone so tightly my knuckles went white. My heartbeat was in my throat. My mind screamed he lied. He lied about everything. And then like clockwork my phone buzzed again. This time it was Ethan. Sorry babe, still at the office. Don't wait up. The audacity of it nearly made me laugh. Nearly. Instead I typed nothing. I stared at the screen, fingers trembling, rage surging through the shock like a second heartbeat. I realized something in that moment. This wasn't just cheating. It wasn't just a fling. It was an entire second life he'd been living behind my back. A life where I didn't exist. A life where I was nothing but a placeholder, a shadow. And shadows, I thought bitterly, can be deadly if you underestimate them. I stood, pacing the living room, phone clutched in my palm like a weapon. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, but one truth cut through the fog. My future had just been stolen. And I wasn't about to sit quietly while he got away with it. I didn't know how yet. I didn't know when. But I knew one thing. This betrayal wouldn't end with me curled up on the floor, broken. Whoa. It would end with him losing everything. Because the day I learned about his secret double life was the day I began building mine. And that night, as the city lights flickered outside our window, I whispered to myself a vow Ethan would one day regret. He thinks he's playing two lives. But when I'm done, he won't have either. Hang on, before I tell you what happened next, make sure you've subscribed and left your thoughts in the comments. This part gets intense. When I first met Ethan, I thought I had stumbled into one of those love stories people write songs about. I was 23, juggling 2 jobs and graduate school, exhausted but still clinging to the idea that the right person could make the world feel lighter. He was the charming stranger at my friend's birthday dinner. Dark suit, easy laugh, the kind of confidence that made you believe he had everything under control. He noticed me right away, or at least he made me feel like he did. "You've got the kind of smile that stops a room," he told me, and I swear I melted on the spot. We fell hard fast. Late-night drives with the windows down, take-out dinners in bed, promises whispered like gospel. Ethan said all the things I had secretly wanted to hear, that I was special, that he'd never met anyone like me, that he could see a forever with me. And I believed him. God, I wanted to believe him. Looking back now, I see the cracks. But at the time they felt like quirks, like the imperfections you accept in someone you love. Like how he guarded his phone as if it were a limb. If I reached for it to check the time, he'd joke, "Careful, classified information," and snatch it back with a grin. I laughed it off, telling myself everyone values privacy. Or the nights he'd disappear with a vague excuse. Late meeting. Last-minute drinks with a client. He always came back smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his usual one, but I told myself I was overthinking. And then there were the lies wrapped in kindness. He'd say, "I don't want you to stress about bills," and insist on handling the rent, even though I wanted to contribute. First it felt like love, like he was protecting me. But later I realized it was control, quiet and suffocating. One memory stands out more than the rest. We were at a rooftop bar, the city glowing beneath us. My best friend had just gotten engaged, and I asked him, half joking, when he was going to put a ring on my finger. He smiled, kissed my forehead and said, "Patience, Harper. Some things are worth waiting for." I believed him. 2 months later he proposed. A candlelit dinner, roses, a ring that sparkled under the lights. He even got down on one knee. I thought my heart would burst. But what I didn't know then, what I only see now, is that even as he slid that ring onto my finger, he was already living a life with someone else. The cracks were there, but I plastered over them with love, with hope, with the idea that I wasn't just building a future with him, I was building our future. And maybe that's why the betrayal cut so deep. Because I hadn't just trusted him. I had built my entire world on the foundation of his promises. And foundations built on lies, they don't just crack, they collapse. The night after I received that Instagram message, I sat in our bedroom staring at the engagement ring on my finger. The diamond caught the lamplight, sparkling like it had the day he proposed. But now it looked different. Cold. Hollow. For the first time I wondered, how many of those moments, the laughs, the kisses, the whispered promises, were real? Or was I always just one half of a life he never planned to fully give me? I wanted to rip the ring off, to fling it across the room. But I didn't. Instead, I slid it off slowly, deliberately, and placed it in the drawer of my nightstand. Because something inside me whispered that one day soon, that ring would become a weapon. Not a symbol of love, but a reminder of what he lost when he underestimated me. And as I closed the drawer, I promised myself I'd no longer be the girl who ignored cracks in the wall. I'd be the woman who brought the entire house down. Before we move on, take a second to hit subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think so far. I didn't set out to catch him. I think that's the worst part. A piece of me still wanted to believe the message I got was some sick joke, or maybe just a jealous stranger trying to stir trouble. But the truth doesn't stay buried. Not when it's clawing to the surface. It was a Saturday afternoon when the first undeniable sign appeared. Ethan said he had a work emergency. Normally I would have brushed it off, but something in the way he avoided my eyes set off alarms in my chest. I watched him button his shirt in the mirror. His hands steady, his smile forced. "You sure it's work?" asked, trying to sound casual. He chuckled, leaning in to kiss my forehead. "You worry too much, Harper. I'll be back before you know it." I nodded, but the knot in my stomach didn't ease. When the door shut behind him, I stared at it for a long time. My hand shook as I reached for my phone. For the first time in years, I decided to follow him. I grabbed my keys, heart pounding, and slipped into my car a few minutes later. The city streets blurred as I tailed him from a distance, praying he wouldn't notice. He drove with the ease of someone who thought no one was watching, until he pulled up to a townhouse on the other side of town. My breath caught. I parked down the street, close enough to see but far enough to hide. Ethan stepped out of his car, straightened his jacket, and walked up the front steps like he belonged there. The door opened, and a woman appeared. Long dark hair, easy smile. She leaned into him, kissed him like it was the most natural thing in the world. And he kissed her back, his hands on her waist, like he'd done to me 1,000 times before. My world went silent. No cars. No birds. Just the sound of my heart cracking wide open. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles burned. Every muscle in my body screamed to storm up there, to tear the facade apart right then and there. But I couldn't move. I could only watch as the man I thought I knew walked into her home, his hand on her lower back, disappearing inside. I sat there for an hour, maybe more, until my legs went numb and my chest ached from holding in sobs. When he finally came back out, his shirt slightly wrinkled, his smile lazy and satisfied, I felt my stomach turn. He got in his car and drove away just like that. No guilt in his posture. No hesitation. Just a man splitting his life in two without a care. I drove home in a daze. My body was there, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the kiss, the way she looked at him, the way he looked at her. It wasn't just cheating. It was intimacy. Familiarity. A double life that had been going on for God knows how long. That night, when he came home, he wrapped his arms around me like nothing had happened. His voice was light, his tone playful. "Sorry I was late," he said, pressing a kiss to my cheek. "How was your day?" I almost laughed. Almost. But the sound died in my throat. Instead I whispered, "Fine." And in that moment, I realized something chilling. Ethan didn't just lie to me. He didn't even think he needed to hide it anymore. That's how sure he was of his control. That's how little he thought of me. Later, as he slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, my mind spinning with fury. Every memory felt poisoned. Every kiss, every whispered "I love you," every plan we made for our future, it all rotted inside me like spoiled fruit. And yet, beneath the heartbreak, something else stirred. Rage. Cold, sharp, unrelenting rage. I had reached my lowest point, lying next to the man who had shattered me while pretending to be the love of my life. But as the hours passed, as the sky outside began to pale with morning light, that rage began to harden into something else. Resolve. Because I knew then, I wasn't going to cry into my pillow forever. I wasn't going to be the naive girl who ignored the cracks. I was going to make sure the man who lived a double life lost both of them. And I would make sure he had nothing left. Before we go any further, click subscribe and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? The morning after I watched Ethan walk out of that townhouse, I didn't cry. Not a single tear. I brewed coffee, buttered toast, and moved through the kitchen like a ghost, every motion precise, deliberate. He strolled in, kissed the top of my head, and asked if I wanted to go hiking that weekend. I smiled faintly. We'll see. But inside my mind was already plotting. Because if Ethan wanted to build two lives, I would burn them both to ash. The first step was knowledge. Secrets only thrive in the dark, and I was done stumbling around blind. While he showered, I sat on the couch with my laptop open, my fingers steady as I typed his name into search bars, his email into recovery forms, his phone number into forgotten account logins. Piece by piece, I pulled threads from his digital life. Second bank account. Credit card I had never seen. Reservations at restaurants I'd never been to. Always for two. And then the final knife. A set of receipts for gifts, jewelry, perfume, designer shoes, none of which had ever touched my hands. I printed everything. Each sheet of paper was like gasoline poured onto the fire in my chest. The second step was patience. I couldn't just storm into his life, waving evidence like a torch. That would only give him a chance to explain, to lie, to manipulate. I wanted his mask to crack publicly, in front of the people whose approval he valued most. And I knew exactly where that would be. Our engagement party. It was set for 3 weeks away, a grand affair at a hotel ballroom his parents had insisted on. Friends, family, colleagues, everyone important in his world would be there. He would stand in the center, smiling, boasting about the life he had built, the fiancé he had chosen, the future he was crafting. And I would be there too, holding the truth like a blade behind my back. The third step was strategy. I couldn't just show up with papers and expect people to believe me. I needed the story airtight, undeniable. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I reached out to the other woman. Her name was Lydia. I found her through one of the receipts, her name tucked neatly on a boutique invoice. I sat in my car outside her townhouse one afternoon, my palms damp, my chest tight. When she answered the door, she looked at me with confusion, then recognition. "You're Harper, aren't you?" she whispered. The world tilted. "You know who I am." She nodded slowly. "He said you were complicated, controlling, that you two were basically over." My stomach twisted, but I held my ground. "We're engaged. He proposed to me 6 months ago." Lydia's hand flew to her mouth. Her face paled. And in that moment, I saw the betrayal etching across her features too. She wasn't my enemy. She was another victim. We sat at her kitchen table for hours. She showed me texts, photos, emails, evidence of trips, dates, late-night confessions. In one picture, he was in the same shirt he had worn to dinner with my parents, just hours apart. I left with everything I needed, proof beyond denial. The final step was execution. Every night, as Ethan slept beside me, I arranged the pieces. A folder of documents, a slideshow of photos, a timeline of deceit so clear it would burn itself into memory. I rehearsed the words I would say, my voice steady, my eyes sharp. And each morning I kissed him goodbye, smiled when he asked about my day, and nodded when he called me his forever. Inside I was already gone. 3 weeks slipped by like sand through my fingers. The night before the engagement party, Ethan leaned close, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered, "Tomorrow, everyone will see how lucky I am to have you." I smiled back, the folder hidden in my bag upstairs. "Tomorrow," I whispered, "they'll see everything." The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, the tables draped in white linen, glasses filled with champagne that caught the light like liquid gold. Ethan stood at the center of it all, grinning, charming, shaking hands with guests who toasted to his bright future. And I stood beside him, my lips painted in a smile sharp enough to cut. I had spent weeks perfecting this moment. The folder in my bag felt heavier than any diamond ring could. Every word I rehearsed hummed in the back of my mind, steady as a heartbeat. "Babe," Ethan whispered as the photographer lined us up for a photo. "You look incredible tonight." I tilted my head, meeting his gaze. "So do you. But looks can be deceiving, can't they?" He chuckled, not catching the edge in my tone. "Always with the jokes." I let him have his last laugh. When the clinking of glasses signaled speeches, Ethan's mother beamed and handed him the microphone. He launched into his usual performance. The doting fiancé, the man who had found the love of his life, the man building a future on trust and devotion. My stomach knotted, not with nerves but with anticipation. When he turned to me, gesturing for me to say a few words, I stepped forward slowly. My heels clicked against the polished floor, each step a countdown to detonation. "Thank you," I began, my voice calm but clear. Tonight is about truth, about commitment, about knowing the person who promises to stand by your side for the rest of your life. Ethan smiled, proud, oblivious. And that's why, I continued, reaching into my bag, I think it's only fair everyone here knows who Ethan really is. The room hushed. Glasses paused midair. I laid the first photo on the table, a picture of Ethan with Lydia. His arm around her waist, time-stamped just 3 weeks before. Gasps rippled through the room. Ethan's smile faltered. "Harper, what are you doing?" "Showing the truth," I said evenly, sliding forward the next set of documents. The second apartment, the hidden bank account, the lies he told me, and the lies he told her. Lydia stepped from the back of the room then, her face pale but her shoulders squared. We had agreed on this moment. She raised her phone, projecting a slideshow onto the ballroom screen. Pictures, messages, receipts, every betrayal laid bare in high definition. Guests shifted uncomfortably, whispers growing into a storm. Ethan's colleagues stared. His parents covered their mouths, and the ring on my finger suddenly felt like a shackle I was ready to break. Ethan lunged toward me, his voice desperate. "We can talk about this in private." "No," I cut him off, my voice sharp as glass. "You don't get private anymore. You made your betrayal public the moment you built a second life. Now everyone sees the man you really are." Lydia clicked to the final slide. Ethan, barefaced in his lies, writing to her about how he was stuck with Harper until he figured out a way out. The room erupted. Some guests stood and left, others glared, whispers slicing through the air like knives. Ethan's mother collapsed into a chair. His father shook his head in disgust. And me. I slipped the engagement ring from my finger and placed it on the table. "You said I was your forever. But forever ends tonight." I walked out as Ethan shouted after me, his voice drowned by the murmurs of betrayal around him. Lydia followed, her heels clicking in rhythm with mine. Outside, the night air was cool, crisp, clean. I inhaled deeply, the weight on my chest lifting for the first time in months. The fallout was immediate. By the next morning, Ethan's company pulled him from client-facing projects. Friends he once bragged to cut ties, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. His parents withdrew financial support, ashamed. And the apartment he had hidden away. Lydia had already called the landlord, handing over every receipt, every false signature, every piece of evidence that would ensure his name was flagged for fraud investigations. He had built 2 lives, but in one night I took them both. Weeks later, as I signed the lease on a new apartment, my own space free of his shadow, I realized something. Ethan had told me once that I was nothing without him. But standing there with keys in my hand, a career blooming, and peace finally flooding my veins, I knew the truth. He was nothing without me. And now everyone else knew it too. And that's how it ended. The man who promised me forever now spends his days cleaning up the ruins of the lies he built. His reputation. His finances. Crumbling. His perfect image. Spose. And me. I rebuilt. Not as someone's fiancé, not as someone's second option, but as myself. Stronger, smarter, untouchable. Sometimes betrayal isn't the end. It's the beginning of a life you never knew you deserved. So remember this. If someone tells you you're nothing without them, prove you're everything without them.